The silent film era, spanning from the late 1890s to the late 1920s, holds a special place in the hearts of the deaf community. This period marked a unique chapter in the history of cinema, where the absence of spoken dialogue created a universal language that everyone could understand, regardless of their ability to hear. It was a time when we were able to enjoy movies just like everyone else. The theaters were filled with a diverse audience, all equally captivated by the moving images on the screen. The magic of cinema was accessible to all, creating a shared experience that transcended the barriers of sound. This era, often called the Golden Age of cinema, was a golden age for deaf people too. The silent films of this time were not just a form of entertainment, they were a medium through which deaf individuals could engage with the world around them. The visual nature of these films meant that everyone, regardless of hearing ability, could follow the story and feel the emotions conveyed by the actors. We were not excluded because of our deafness. In fact, the silent film era was one of the few times in history when deaf people were on an equal footing with their hearing counterparts in terms of accessing and enjoying popular culture. We could experience the magic of storytelling through moving pictures. The silent films used a rich tapestry of visual elements, expressive acting, elaborate sets, and innovative camera techniques to tell their stories. This visual storytelling was something that everyone could appreciate and understand. Thomas Edison's invention of the kinetoscope, a precursor to the motion picture projector, paved the way for this inclusive form of entertainment. The kinetoscope allowed for the creation of moving pictures, which eventually evolved into the silent films that became so beloved by the deaf community. Before silent films, entertainment was often inaccessible to the deaf. Theaters, concerts, and other forms of live entertainment relied heavily on spoken dialogue and music, which excluded those who could not hear. We couldn't hear the music at concerts or understand the dialogue in plays. This often left us feeling isolated and disconnected from the cultural experiences that were readily available to the hearing population. But silent films were different. They broke down these barriers by relying solely on visual elements to tell their stories. This inclusivity was revolutionary for the deaf community. They relied on visual storytelling using facial expressions, gestures, and title cards to convey the plot and emotions. The actors' exaggerated movements and the carefully crafted title cards ensured that the narrative was clear and engaging for everyone. This visual language transcended the barriers of spoken language, making it possible for deaf and hearing audiences alike to understand and enjoy the stories on screen. It created a common ground where everyone could come together and share in the cinematic experience. For the deaf community, silent films were more than just entertainment. They were a bridge that connected us to the hearing world. Through these films, we could participate in the same cultural moments and discussions as our hearing peers. They allowed us to experience the same stories, the same emotions, and the same cultural moments as our hearing peers. This connection was invaluable as it provided a sense of belonging and inclusion that was often lacking in other areas of life. They allowed us to experience the same stories, the same emotions, and the same cultural moments as our hearing peers. This shared experience was a powerful tool for fostering understanding and empathy between the deaf and hearing communities. This shared experience fostered a sense of inclusion and belonging that was rare for deaf people at the time. It was a time when we could feel truly connected to the broader society, sharing in the joys and sorrows depicted on the silver screen. The silent film era was a time of great social change and artistic innovation. The films of this period pushed the boundaries of what was possible in cinema, experimenting with new techniques and storytelling methods. It was a time when new technologies and new forms of expression were emerging. The advent of film as a medium opened up new possibilities for artistic expression and communication, allowing filmmakers to explore new ways of telling stories. For the deaf community, it was a time of empowerment and connection. The silent films gave us a voice in the cultural conversation, allowing us to share our perspectives and experiences with the world. It was a time when we were able to fully participate in the cultural conversation and share in the magic of cinema. The silent film era was a unique and special time for the deaf community, one that we look back on with fondness and gratitude. Silent films were inherently visual. They relied on the power of images to tell stories and evoke emotions. This emphasis on visual communication made them uniquely accessible to deaf audiences. We could understand the plot, the characters, and the emotions without relying on spoken dialogue. Facial expressions, gestures, and body language took center stage in silent films. Actors like Charlie Chaplin and Lillian Gish were masters of physical comedy and dramatic expression. Their movements were exaggerated and expressive, conveying a wide range of emotions that transcended language barriers. Title cards, inserted between scenes, provided dialogue and narration. While these cards were written in English, they were often short and easy to understand. The visual context of the film also helped to clarify the meaning of the text. The absence of sound forced filmmakers to be more creative and innovative in their storytelling. They had to rely on visual cues to convey information and engage the audience. This resulted in a highly visual and expressive style of filmmaking that was perfectly suited for deaf viewers. The silent film era played a crucial role in preserving sign language. Before the advent of film, sign language was primarily an oral tradition passed down from generation to generation. There was no standardized form of sign language, and regional variations were common. Silent films provided a new platform for sign language. Deaf filmmakers began to create films that featured deaf actors and sign language dialogue. These films were often shown in deaf clubs and schools, providing a valuable record of early sign language. However, the use of sign language in films was not without its challenges. The oralist movement, which advocated for teaching deaf people to speak and lip read, gained prominence in the early 20th century. Oralists viewed sign language as a crutch that hindered deaf people from integrating into mainstream society. Despite these challenges, deaf filmmakers persisted in using sign language in their films. They recognized the importance of preserving their language and culture. These early films provide a fascinating glimpse into the evolution of sign language and the lives of deaf people during the silent film era. Section 4. The sound barrier, a loss for deaf audiences. The transition from silent films to talkies in the late 1920s marked a turning point in cinematic history. This era, often referred to as the Golden Age of Hollywood, brought about a revolution in the way stories were told on the silver screen. However, it also marked a period of exclusion for deaf audiences. The once inclusive nature of silent films, which relied heavily on visual storytelling, was overshadowed by the advent of sound. The arrival of sound revolutionized filmmaking, but it also created a significant barrier for those who could not hear. The intricate soundscapes and dialogues that enriched the cinematic experience for hearing audiences became a source of frustration and alienation for the deaf community. Suddenly, deaf audiences were shut out from the shared cinematic experience. The theaters that once welcomed them with open arms now seemed like fortresses of exclusion. The visual storytelling that had made silent films so accessible was now secondary to spoken dialogue. The rich, expressive performances that conveyed emotions and narratives without a single word were replaced by actors' voices, leaving deaf viewers in the dark. Deaf moviegoers could no longer follow the plot or understand the characters without subtitles or interpreters, which were rare in those days. The lack of accessibility options meant that many deaf individuals were left guessing the storyline, missing out on the nuances and depth of the films. The loss of access to mainstream cinema was a significant blow to the deaf community. It wasn't just about missing out on entertainment, it was about being excluded from a cultural phenomenon that was shaping society. It created a sense of isolation and exclusion. The communal experience of watching a film, sharing reactions, and discussing it afterward was lost. Deaf individuals found themselves on the outside looking in, unable to participate in the collective joy of cinema. Deaf audiences were forced to rely on specialized theaters that catered to their needs, but these were few and far between. These theaters often struggled to stay afloat, and their limited number meant that many deaf individuals had no access to them. The advent of sound also had a profound impact on deaf actors and filmmakers. The opportunities that had once been available to them in the silent film era dwindled rapidly. With the emphasis shifting to spoken dialogue, deaf talent was largely shut out of Hollywood. The industry, now focused on vocal performances, had little room for those who communicated through sign language or relied on visual storytelling. The opportunities that had existed during the silent era, when visual storytelling reigned supreme, all but disappeared. The rich contributions of deaf actors and filmmakers were overshadowed by the new sound-centric approach, leaving a void in the industry that would take decades to address. Section 5. Deaf Cinema, a place for our stories. The world of cinema has always been a powerful medium for storytelling, a place where diverse voices can be heard and unique perspectives can be shared. Despite the challenges posed by the advent of sound, the deaf community refused to be silenced. The transition to sound in the late 1920s and early 1930s posed significant obstacles, but it also sparked a creative revolution within the deaf community. Deaf filmmakers began to create their own films, specifically for deaf audiences. These pioneering individuals saw the potential of cinema to reflect their own experiences and to communicate in a visual language that resonated deeply with deaf viewers. These films, often made on shoestring budgets and with limited resources, provided a platform for deaf stories, perspectives, and experiences. The passion and dedication of these filmmakers were evident in every frame as they worked tirelessly to bring their visions to life. Deaf cinema, as it came to be known, emerged as a distinct genre in the mid-20th century. This period saw a blossoming of creativity, with filmmakers exploring new ways to tell stories that were both entertaining and meaningful. These films often explored themes of communication, identity, and the challenges of living in a hearing world. They delved into the nuances of deaf culture, offering insights that were rarely seen in mainstream media. They provided a space for deaf actors to showcase their talents and for deaf stories to be told authentically. The performances were often deeply moving, capturing the emotional depth and complexity of the deaf experience. Deaf cinema also played a crucial role in preserving sign language. By documenting the language on film, these filmmakers ensured that it would be passed down to future generations. By featuring sign language dialogue, these films helped to keep the language alive and vibrant. They showcased the beauty and expressiveness of sign language, highlighting its importance as a cultural and communicative tool. They also introduced sign language to a wider audience, fostering greater understanding and appreciation for deaf culture. These films served as a bridge between the deaf and hearing communities, promoting empathy and awareness. While deaf cinema has always been a niche genre, it has gained increasing recognition in recent years. The contributions of deaf filmmakers are being celebrated more than ever, with awards and accolades highlighting their achievements. Film festivals and online platforms have provided new avenues for deaf filmmakers to share their work with a wider audience. These platforms have democratized access to deaf cinema, allowing more people to experience the richness and diversity of deaf storytelling. Today, deaf cinema continues to evolve, with new voices and fresh perspectives emerging. The future of deaf cinema looks bright, as more filmmakers are inspired to tell their stories and share their unique visions with the world.